Hey guys, here to get one of my all-time favorite bands, Dinosaur Jr., who I saw them live in 2016, and it was just one of my all-time favorite shits I've ever been to, perhaps, because the spirit there was just as alive as ever that they were in their recordings of the 1980s, and the live spirits of it makes it a very unique and original kind of guitars because they're perhaps the ultimate band laying the foundation that part of the rock and roll movement is being okay with inferiority in the correct moment in time. I think Dinosaur Jr. kind of is a calling of because you can express yourself intensely in the moment, but you're not going to over dominate, and you don't need to. Basically, you just take it all into one thing. Direct all that intense fury directly at Mother Nature, not at anybody in particular. That's like that's the Junior's just the king of that. Continuing a lot of the punk and rock and roll foundations of like a lot of Neil Young and a lot of the Stooges. I feel like a lot of those two bands are considered an artist in particular. Neil Young, like he's a genius. Neil Young, my all-time favorite lyricist, perhaps. That's coming down to. The most original band, certainly. But the thing about Dinosaur Jr. is they're just the songwriting is like surprisingly very ambitious. Like it's very out there the way that this band kind of lays out just a virtuoso kind of feeling, but without being overbearing. Like it kind of feels like Jimi Hendrix spirit is going into it. It's further evolving what Jimi Hendrix is doing. Just let it loose. Just let it go. Let it out in a pop kind of way, and it's just fun the entire way through. It's very unpredictable. I would say. Inherently, that's kind of what makes this almost an advancement of like Jimi Hendrix, and even in a further expansion of like the best of Neil Young. It feels like it's always a blast, and you're always hearing a good time, which is the basis that film music always has to get back to at the end of the day. This is a challenge of newfound, freedom I've come to. It's like you need to see the entertainment of it at the end of the day, otherwise it is too ridiculous. No matter how serious it is to you, this is entertainment. And it's life to me, but it's not life to everybody. So that's the grounding basis, of perspective. But the things about this band, like not every single one of their albums are necessarily great, but they always have a charm. I just don't want to listen to them anyways. Like that's just Dinosaur Jr. I can just put on their entire discography on a shuffle, and I just don't get tired of listening to them. Although their masterpieces, most certainly, you're living all over me. But we'll get into 1985, Dinosaur. Which is okay. It kind of feels like a lot of like a foreshadow to a lot of like the Flaming Lips sound of the early 90s, where it feels like it's almost a little too far into the hardcore territory, maybe in its pop expressionism. But I think there's just not much to say here. They just got to be perfect. By far the best album they made in 1987 with You're Living All Over Me. This is such a genius album of rock the entire way through. Like, continuing the progression of the Stooges in a way where every song feels powerful, fun, loose, and youthful, much in the same way of like Stooges and like My Bloody Valentine. But this is like just another kind of voice altogether from My Bloody Valentine. This is a lot more embracing the gritty, like the calm of gritty. I think that's what perhaps the feeling of Neil Young I love so much, and it kind of comes out here as well. And like Little Furry Things is just really beautiful and harsh all the same, and capturing madness. Like a lot of this album is kind of madness, just being too close around maybe others. Just that desire for intense isolation, just to do the thing you love the most. Sometimes you just don't want to leave that spirit you feel. But sometimes that interruption does kind of cause a distraction that feels less impactful in the heat of the moment of what you're striving to build up to. But Matrix just kind of communicates like a lot of it. The tone and spirit reminds me a lot of like honestly like the 90s era of Richard Linklater films, which is like it feels like there's a little bit of a slacker energy living inside of it, which is like a lazy man kind of walking around and doing it like a genius. Like I think there's nothing wrong with it because sometimes that slow-paced personality ends up kind of landing golden moments and moments. He strives for moments, so it all comes together in a certain kind of way. It's very influential, very inspiring. But they always just wear their influence on their sleeve in a certain kind of way like that. A little bit like a lot of Jimi Hendrix is living in this too. A forward-thinking foundation of Jimi Hendrix. Feels like a much man, honestly this album feels so much like the early 90s, like in the really the whole all spectrum of the 90s. I think it foreshadows that's what some of the best of the 80s was actually doing in the rock scene, foreshadowing the best of the 90s, which is the harsh tone, like kind of the harsher tone of the grunge, but the happier side of it too. It's actually kind of uplifting and celebrating ultimately rather than depressing, but it's like perfect alternative rock where everyone's happy all throughout. Man, that's really awesome. Again, it's just punk, and it sludges around. It just feels melodic the entire way through. And it just feels like really enjoyable. And I always feel just very relaxed by the guitar tone that's kind of conveyed here, which is just raw and sloppy, but with just such a shaking feeling that it's almost like Sludge Feast. And just this guitar work here is just really impressive from a technical standpoint. It just feels like on a personal level, it just feels so good on the soul and spirit. And again, it's like almost like the intentional sloppy feeling, which is what hits me the most as a guitarist. I'm realizing when I'm playing out, I'm like the sloppy, intentionally slop, like, but there's like intentionalism of like, spirit living inside that kind of sloppy playing. I think that's why I can come back to Led Zeppelin, because Jimmy Page is like a little bit of a lazy guitarist, but listen to all this here, just like the lung. I mean, I love how build up the build up, beautiful the build up feels in that song. Little furry things that again I have to mention and just say, yeah. I mean, it's an all-time masterpiece. The way that it just feels warped, cracked, just has some of the best melodies of all time. I absolutely love the jangle guitar work on that song in particular. Just the noise of it. It just, it feels like you want to capture a raw feeling much like that. My favorite song on the album is going to be Raisins, which is just even for more of a forward foundation of just what's going on. And that guitar pitch is just genius. The way that it expresses just, it's something entirely. I really love this album. In a Jar just continues the foundation of the Ramones in a lot of ways. It's really funny the entire way through. Like, it's almost like a goofy kind of spirit, but the bass is just mad and it's serious too, all the same. And yeah, it's awesome. I really enjoy that. Polito is a very strange song. That one kind of just drifts a little bit, maybe the weakest mode of the album. It's still fascinating, all the same. It kind of foreshadows maybe some of the best parts of Peter Gabriel's passion. But yeah, I love this album so much. This is a band that, sometimes they go completely out of control, but here I think they just refine their madness to something just quite perfect, much like the Stooges were doing in the best moments. Continuing foundation, most certainly. Yeah, I mean, so many perfect songs. And they also have an eye cover just like Heaven. That's pretty funny. But then we get to 1988 one, which was, I know a lot of people can point to this as like also kind of another masterpiece. And it's certainly a very well-balanced album. I mean, it certainly feels like it's a little bit more of a solo-driven kind of album effort more than You're Living All Over. That was a little more of a group project. I feel like the band certainly splits apart. And honestly, that's kind of what I came to learn over time. Apparently, the band did not get along at all. There was a certain, dislike kind of going on through all this, but they just keep moving in their own kind of way. Like songs like Freak Scene just feels like over the top and very enthusiastic. But I mean, the guitar work here is just awesome. I mean, it just feels like it's all over the place. And it just feels like it's always going on a perfect kind of wavelength. It feels like just going for something so catchy and so melodic that it just feels perfect on the spirit. Songs like Freak Scene just kind of come together and bring something that's just really awesome. Oh, it's so good. Oh, I love this whole feeling and spirit. It's like it's like a slight expansion pack if you're looking over. That expansion pack is like, okay, it's just more of that great feeling. It's awesome. All the way that they cool us off is so incredible. And it just gets better as it kind of progresses too, because I feel like the melodies here just consistently become more and more fascinating. Songs like Don't just have this like a lot of freak out moments there that just feel so ahead of its time. Like reminds me a lot of like American football best moments in a lot of ways. Oh man, the Freak Scene's the moment here that really lands. Then you got 1991 Green Mine, and that's where they started. In the 90s, Dinosaur Jr. just kind of got in the sound. It changed quite a bit here because now it's like, honestly, it's funny because now it feels like the early 2000s where it's almost like a lot of the 90s acts were maybe getting more mainstream and it was getting awkward. Like R.E.M. is a main example, rather than the great. Like stuff like a lot of this just it's pretty interesting, but it's not a personal favorite by any means. Except for the song Wagon, really. And you got a lot of stuff that feels a little bit like what Neil Young. He was actually kind of a genius in the early 90s. He certainly had a resurgence, much like the films of Robert Altman. It's just like, like he had something genius in the 70s. He was kind of crazy in the 80s, and then he just came back with Robert Altman's good stuff. In the 90s, though, Neil Young and Robert Altman came back, and so did Dinosaur Jr. here in 1993, though. I mean, because Where You Been definitely said something like a song like Start Chopping. That's the biggest hit on the album, and a lot of it kind of feels like just stuff that kind of rambles a little more, but it still feels like a foundation that reminds me a lot of like Neil Young's doing at Harvest Moon. It's just more like a laid-back kind of hard rock sound, but still, I always just want to go back to You're Living All Over. The 80s stuff they were doing ultimately. But 1994, you have Without a Sound, and that's just, it's pretty dull. I don't care much for that one. That's just too far into the slacker realm. I think there is a limit there. I think that kind of captures it. They were getting a little bit into that by the Cigarette Band is not going to literally the lazy is just too overwhelming. So it's like, it's kind of stubborn maybe how he wants to portray it. They handed it over in 1997. It's not bad, but I can't think of too much about it. Beyond 2007, they get back together, but it's okay. I mean, they get a little bit better. 2010, they got a lot better, but I think in the 2000s, they were kind of building and continuing this kind of slacker energy into something that just feels a little bit more, a little more focused on the melodies. I think that's definitely the most interesting. But when they play live, though, boy, is it back. I think because that's the thing. I think they're such a raw in the moment kind of band that it feels like the studio probably feels like too much effort for them in a lot of ways. It's like it's literally just got to be on a moment, which is when you catch them in a moment, it is genius. That's about like Farm in 2009. Yeah, it just really feels great all the way through. And in 2012, I Built in the Sky. I don't know. I thought this was just okay. Like, it's like even though you got, I mean, the songs are necessarily great. It's just great to hear just a great guitarist in action in itself in a lot of ways. And that's Dinosaur Jr. But yeah, you get the picture, by the way, the late '80s stuff to a point here. I mean, the solos here just kind of get a little exhausting, but still it continues with something here that does influence, so like Neil Young influence in the particularities of just the raw guitar work in a lot of ways. 2016, I get a glimpse of What You're Not, which, yeah, that's a pretty good one. I think that's where they kind of officially got to a vibe that feels the closest to their late 80s stuff, but still, I always want to go back to that the most. But yeah, the pop here is still good all the same. I haven't even heard the album today until 21, which is Sweeter Than Space. That's Dinosaur Jr. Pretty amazing. I really recommend them to anybody, honestly. They're quite an amazing band. Just the album here living all over me. I think just take in what it feels like when you have those moments where you just kind of prefer that sort of isolation, embracing a moment at spirit that is hard to explain, but you know it for yourself. And, you know, this is a band that kind of represents that sort of newfound joy whenever those sparks and lights hit you in a lot of ways. That's nice. I highly recommend it.